Oh, hello, everyone, and welcome to another adventure in history. I'm your host, Shane McInnes, traveler, eater of Oreos. Kind of a bummed out guy this week. World has been a bit crazy around us. Woohoo! And health to you too, my friend. Um, it's been a weird week, everybody. I'm pretty sure everybody that has not lived under a rock for the past 12 to 14 days understands that, but there are definitely things going on right now that are going to be written about in history. Things that are happening around us that are going to be important things that have either started the ball rolling on stuff or continue to roll the ball on things. And it is a rather momentous time to be alive in the world right now. Lots of interesting and difficult things. What? I don't know what the "what" means. What as in, is there actually something going on, or what as in what? Anyway, hope everybody is doing all right. I'm in an odd mood. Part of me has sort of wanted to spend this entire week under a rock. That is not easy for me to do. I sort of feed on news and knowledge and bringing stuff in and keeping appraised of events. So the other half of me has really wanted to just fight people and spend a lot of time arguing on the internet. I haven't actually done any of that, the arguing that is. I've mostly tried to keep my peace. I'm pretty sure everybody has a fair idea of where I stand on most of the stuff that's happening right now. But suffice to say that until the world recognizes that human beings are all 99.5+% the exact same, and that doesn't make anybody better or worse than anybody else, there are going to be problems like this. It is sad. It does not have to happen. And I think we could all agree, or hopefully we can all agree, that there are things that could have been done better. And I know that this is not a political stream. You all did not come here to hear me opine about my particular viewpoints in the present kind of pop cultural political world, so I won't dive too far into that pool, but I do hope everybody is doing all right. Welcome to all of my viewers. So, you obviously support domestic terrorism by used car salesman from Springfield. I'm not sure exactly if I catch all of that. I'm guessing that's a Sideshow Bob reference from The Simpsons, perhaps? I'm not sure. I never really got into The Simpsons. I watched a few episodes here and there, but I know that's probably anathema, and that I've probably lost a lot of street cred to people. I apologize. It's not that I don't like The Simpsons, it's just that I never really got into them. Cobra Commander's Comics Origin. Oh yeah, I'm wearing the Cobra shirt. I don't know if that meant anything. It's just the first shirt that I saw that I felt like would be nerdy enough to fit the bill, right? I don't know if I've ever actually read any of those old G.I. Joe comics. I'll have to go back and do that. I am rambling and wandering. I should probably get to business, right? For those of you that do not know me, if you do not know me, I am Shane McInnes. I teach college for a living. I teach history. I've been a teacher in one form or another for about 13 years now. My stream is set up to try to break down the walls around history, especially the ideas that history is kind of a boring subject that not a lot of people care for, and also the idea that history is a sort of throwaway subject that people don't really need to pay attention to that much. Both of these things are Cobra 111. I think you have to hit the shift button there darling, to get the exclamations. Anyway, the idea here is that history can be fun and approachable, and that it is not some sort of unreachable, stodgy, ivory tower sort of approach thing. We can all appreciate history a little bit more and learn a little bit more about the world that we live on and the people that we live on this world with, who are more like us than they are different. And I have harped on that from the beginning of my show, not just this episode, but from the beginning way on back, and I will continue to harp on that in the future, and I'll say it again. We are all way more alike than we are different, and we focus perhaps too much on the differences and not enough on the similarities, right? Thank you. The puppy is still licking. We're trying to work on those allergies, but she's just not responding very well to the medication all the time. Okie dokie. So, the fun stuff. Here is my email address. If you'd like to send me an email, you're welcome to. Whatever you would like. If you want to send me pictures of stuff, if you want to send me just a hey-ho, if you want to send me an email chewing me out and saying that my opinions are horribly wrong, you are welcome to do so. I'd be happy for any feedback. Right here you can see my social media. I am on both Twitter and Instagram. I post pictures of places that I've been and stuff that relates to the streams on Instagram. On Twitter, I don't really ever put too much of my opinion. I mostly just post historical articles that I run across when I'm digging around on the internet. I read quite a few things. This is the part of it's hard for me to sort of disconnect from the news. Yep, fun times. And tonight we will be talking about ancient China, that you can see I pulled up here on the map. And as always, we have a goofy little pop cultural reference for our title, What I Like About You. Hope everybody gets that one. You here referring to a particular gentleman, not you. I mean, I like you all. You all bring me joy. And what is the thing that Marie Kondo says? This brings me joy or happiness. I've never actually watched any of that stuff. I've just seen the memes. So I'm probably behind on that level of pop culture too. I think it sparks joy. Is that it? This sparks joy? I'm not sure. I could probably clean out my house and get rid of a lot of stuff. I know that. All right. So we are going to be talking about China, and this is sort of a continuation of our discussion about the Neolithic and Bronze Age settlements across the world. So far, we have focused a little bit on early Mesopotamia, Sumer, Acadia. Then we moved over, talked a little bit about the Indus River Valley civilizations, and China is going to be our sort of next big cultural powerhouse sort of thing. I've been selling stuff like crazy. Yeah, I probably could get rid of some stuff too. We collect things as we go, right? So, China, as all of our ancient civilizations, is going to start out around some rivers. These rivers are the Yangtze, which is this guy right here, and the Yellow River, which is frequently referred to as China's sorrow because of all of its flooding. But when you think of China today, if we look at the borders, China's a very, very big place today, right? It encompasses all of this territory, all of these huge, vast differences of geography, geology. We've got big deserts. We've got really high Tibetan Plateau. We have some of the plains up here in what is today called Manchuria. And then you've got all of these sort of standard river basin systems and stuff like that, right? Well, ancient China is not even kind of that big. It's sort of a strange thing. For most of the early part of China, it is not a big deal when it comes to the scope and size of it. If we're looking at it geographically, it's maybe a tenth of the size of modern China. So if we're looking at stuff of ancient China, we're mostly going to be looking in kind of this region up here. And there's a big, nice, green, flat, fertile plain right here. And then there are some nice, big, flat plains up here. And sort of this little oval-shaped region is where most of the ideas and people that we're going to be talking about tonight are living, right? And again, this is sort of trying to bring everybody up to a level playing field. I want to get everybody on Earth that is a big Bronze Age culture, sort of up to this Bronze Age. And then we'll talk about how a lot of this stuff changes pretty quickly, because a lot of these Bronze Age cultures fall apart rather rapidly around this sort of communal time period between about 1200, well, I guess about between 1300 BC to about 1100 BC. You're going to see a lot of these big cultures go and sort of have to deal with the fallout of giant global collapse of systems, which I hope isn't too prophetic of the word that we live in right now. Hopefully we're not watching systems collapse. Hope not, right? Okie dokie. And before we launch into this, as always, if you have questions, please let me know. I would appreciate feedback, sarcastic remarks, goofy comments, anything that lets me know that you're alive out there. I'll take it. Criticisms, as always, you can think that I'm full of crap. And I encourage you to think freely and make your minds up for yourselves. I'm just a guy talking about stuff, right? Okie dokie. So we're talking about these two big river valleys, the Yangtze River Valley and the Yellow River Valley. It's the end of the world as we know it. Yeah. So you're going to start seeing people in China settle down into villages. That sort of early transition from hunter-gatherer to sedentary lifestyle that we've been talking about. That's going to start happening around 7000 BC. People get to China somewhere in the 70,000 BC range. And the 7000 BC range is a little bit slower than the Sumerian region, Mesopotamia, a little bit slower than the Indus River Valley. But again, we're accounting for people migrating. It takes a long time for people groups to move into China. We're talking something that's, 2,000 miles away from the Indus River Valley. People had to cover that over time by moving by themselves. So you can catch them a little bit of a break, right? You're going to start seeing agriculture show up around the 4,000 mark in China. And you're going to start seeing that good old-fashioned rice being cultivated. Rice cultivation, of course, is going to be a staple of Chinese culture going all the way back to this period of time. And you're going to start seeing individual groups of people that are going to start having physical culture that identifies them as unique. This is the moment where you have that Neolithic revolution, right? Where you can grow more food than you need. And that means people can do cool stuff, right? And you can specialize. And the oldest of the Chinese physical cultures that has really been identified conclusively is called the Yangshao culture. The Yangshao culture is going to show up somewhere around the 5000 BC mark. And they are going to stretch to about the 3000 BC mark. So 5000 to 3000, they are going to live in pretty big cities. Now, when we say big city, we have to sort of remember that there's a difference between a city and a city-state, right? So in this Yangshao culture, we're going to be talking about cities that are sort of not going to be big regional powers. They're going to have the control of maybe the little bubble right around them, but we're not talking about big, super powerful kings that are leading big armies out and conquering other city-states. And the biggest of these cities that has been discovered is at a location called Banpo. And there's been a lot of work recently in China to really classify and typify a lot of the things that have been going on in the ancient part of China to try to get a better idea of how these people lived and what they looked like. So the city of Banpo was fairly large. It's about 15 acres in size, which is a pretty big city in the ancient world for somebody that's sort of moving into the the early part of the cultural movement, right? So we're still transitioning out of the Neolithic age. They're still making stone tools, but they are making some really nice pottery. And the Yangshao pottery stuff is actually very impressive. And I've got a picture here that I can show you. This is a Yangshao vase. And if we look at it and compare it to some of the other pieces of pottery that we're talking about that we've seen in the past, this is actually pretty elaborate when it comes to pottery. We've got a really nice pattern here that's got different colors, pretty intricately detailed. We've got the lip around the opening here. We've got some nice handles. We've pretty clearly got a pedestal down here at the bottom for the vase to stand on, which makes it much more durable. This would have had your inside lip to sort of add some structural integrity to the vase itself. And again, this is stuff coming from the 5000 to 3000 BC range. That's pretty impressive for a vase that is today, looking back at it, somewhere around 5,000 to 8,000 years old. That's pretty nice looking stuff. In my opinion, I think it's comparatively easy to say that this is good looking stuff. But this Yangshao culture, as you can tell, it's no slouch. These cities are, again, big, they're nice. And another thing that you're going to start seeing at the sort of the nascent or early phases of is good old-fashioned silk production. The Yangshao people are going to have the first evidence of silk production inside of China. Silk, of course, is going to be probably the second most identifiable good that comes out of China, right? If we're talking about stuff that China has abundance of in the ancient world, what we're looking at is food and silk, right? And I know silk is probably the most famous, but food is actually the one that they trade the most of. China produces an enormous amount of food. Silk is very nice, though. Silk production is very, very, very labor intensive. To not go too far into it, basically, of course, there are certain caterpillars that they eventually turn into moths, and you have to treat them particular ways. You have to feed them certain amounts. They have to be kept in a certain type of climate. They die pretty easily. The eggs have to be handled a certain way. It's very labor intensive, and of course this makes the process of making silk an expensive one, which is why silk is such a rare trade commodity in the ancient world. There's not a lot of it. It's very, very pretty. It's also very light and airy, and it feels nice when you wear it. This is why everybody wants it. Right? And we'll talk more about silk as we go, because they're just sort of figuring it out during the Yangshao culture. Right? And around that 3000 mark, you start seeing a little bit more of an organized regional type of Chinese village or city, and this is going to be called the Longshan culture. So Longshan culture is going to be somewhere around the 3000 BC mark. When the Yangshao culture kind of declines a little bit, you're going to see the rise of the Longshan culture, and these guys are going to stretch until about 1900 BC. There is a lot more evidence of organized labor under the Longshan culture. The cities that these people live in are going to be much bigger, made out of much more durable materials. You're also going to start seeing the emergence of organized religion. And one of the things that you're going to get is human sacrifice. Good old-fashioned human sacrifice. Everybody's got to kill somebody every now and then, right? That's not a good thing to do, but if you look at cultures, there's a point where just about every organized major culture goes through a human sacrifice period, right? We talked about that in Mesopotamia, we talked about that in India, here in China, and even when we go over to places like Greece and Rome, and we talk about what we call Western society, those people still killed each other. I would say go watch Midsummer, but it's actually, this is where I really need my opinion hat, right? I didn't really care for Midsummer that much. I thought it was just a kind of a slow remake of The Wicker Man. And I know people love that movie, but it's okay. I don't feel like I completely wasted my time, but I was not scared by it. I saw it coming a mile away. Anyway, Longshan culture killed people for religious purposes, human sacrifice, and they also really started specializing quite a bit. They're going to have a pretty rapid pace of physical culture development. You're going to see a lot more new stuff and new techniques come out. And this is some really interesting stuff. I really like the way that their art does pottery. So let's look at this again is Yangshao stuff. So let's look at some Longshan stuff. So this is what's called burnished pottery. And you can tell just right off the bat that this has got some, just a different level of skill involved, right? So to make an object like this, you have to have a pottery wheel, which had become fairly widespread in China during this period of time. This is what's going to allow you to make these really thin walls that are still structurally sound, and also give you the ability to even then go in later with a little file or a chisel and make these little decorations by actually cutting out pieces of it. But you're still leaving a structurally intact vessel. And this stuff is found all over the place. I've got another one here that I'll, if I can get the images thing to work. Come on now, skip over. Want to go to the next one. Here we go. Yeah, so this is another one of these Longshan vessels. This would have been a pretty ornate drinking goblet, and you can see again all of these really tiny, fine carve-out pieces that make this an item that would probably take, you know, days for a skilled craftsperson to make. Way outside of my ability to make pottery. I can't do anything like this. I've got some friends that actually make pottery. Maybe I'll get them on and they'll talk about some pottery making techniques. I'd love to actually put some ancient pottery in their hands and see if they can give me some ideas that I wouldn't know because I don't work pottery very well. Well, or at all, for that matter. It'd be an interesting thing to do. So, all right. Longshan culture is pretty cool, though. These guys are going to hang around for quite some time. They're also going to be responsible for some of the earliest myths that we get recorded and put down inside China. Now, they don't actually have a writing themselves. They do have some symbols that look like proto-writing that are clearly going to be pieces of evidence that are going to translate into writing later on. But we're mostly talking about decorative symbols, some kind of scratches, some kind of ornate little symbols that don't automatically represent, you know, like a dog or a sun or something like that. So we really don't have a lot of pieces of evidence to classify these things as a written language, but they're clearly part of that evolution towards writing, right? It's not like people one day decide, I'm going to make an alphabet. We've already talked a little bit about how this process works, right? But there are the Longshan culture is going to be responsible for making up some of the first oral myths that get passed down to people later on, that then, of course, then get recorded when we do have writing. And there are these mythical ancient kings of China. And these tell you the story of how China got founded. And I'll go through these kind of briefly. I can throw a whole bunch of strange names at you that don't follow the Indo-European catalog of naming nomenclature, so they all look a little funny. I won't really dwell on this too long, but the first one is Fu Shi. And I know that's spelled funny. Translating ancient Chinese or even modern Chinese into English is not an easy way to go. Their writing has many more symbols than ours do, so we had to borrow some of our letters like X that kind of already makes another noise and give it other titles, anything. Blah, 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 blah. You don't care so much about the weeds of how that gets done, but this is pronounced Fuxi. There's also Shang, and there is Huangdi. Sometimes you see this guy listed as T as well, Huang Ti, and sometimes you see it written as Wang Di, because again, we're translating to a different language and it comes across differently. So these three guys are, again, these mythical ancient kings, and they all have their own little story that kind of goes along with them. So Fuxi was the guy that figured out on his own, completely by himself, how to domesticate animals. Like, he woke up one day and goes, I am such a great king that I will domesticate animals. And he was the guy that domesticated dogs and cats and cows and horses and sheep and goats and all that stuff. So he single-handedly brought domestication. He's also going to instigate the first concept of clan structure inside China. And clans are going to be a very big deal. Your family structure in a lot of these Eastern cultures, especially places like China and Korea and Japan, that we'll talk about later on. These are going to be very important elements of social structure. Shen Nong is going to be the guy that comes up with all of the tools. He's going to be the guy that figures out how to make agricultural implements. He's also going to be the guy that figures out how to make weapons. He's going to also be the guy that figures out agriculture. So his whole creation thing is like, one day he went out and grew crops because he's cool like that. And in his lifespan, he made crops. And then you have Huang Di, who comes along and goes, oh, well, we should make bows and arrows. Now we're making compound weapons. And this is also the guy that comes up completely with the writing structure of ancient China. So they're pretty clearly placeholders, right? These aren't people that actually existed. These are typocasts of sort of cultural movements, right? What happens when a culture transitions from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a sedentary lifestyle? Well, the first thing that they do is form smaller groups and start domesticating animals, right? Well, that's what Fuxi did. And then the next thing they're going to do is start making better tools and learn how to do agriculture. Well, guess what? That's what Shen Nong did. And then the next thing that they're going to end up doing is making weapons and fighting each other and then creating writing. And that's what Huang Di did. So these guys are important because they tell the stories of how China shifted from hunter-gatherer to sedentary lifestyle. And that is their importance. Did they exist? Probably not. Was there a guy named Huang Di that was a really big, powerful dude that did all of these things? Maybe there was a guy that was originally some sort of rural chieftain or maybe even early king that was pretty neat and did some stuff in this work. But you know how stories accumulate and sort of accrete over time. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, right? Or that story of the fish that you caught that was this big and now it's this big. You all are familiar with this kind of stuff, right? Or at least I hope so. All right. So this is the getting the ball rolling part of China, right? But for the majority of Chinese history, or I would guess that the majority of Chinese history that people are aware of, China is broken down into these big dynasties, right? So this is like your Han dynasty and your Zhou dynasty and your Song dynasty and the Yang, all these different dynasties. And we'll go through some of those later on when we get to the point of doing iron and doing steel and bronze, and we're just going to kill everything off tonight at the end of the kind of Chinese Bronze Age. So we're getting there. Don't worry. If you're still out there, by the way, make a noise. Let me know you're still out there. We are reaching that shouting into the darkness phase of the stream where I don't know if I've lost everybody. I know you're still there, by the way. I like people to respond. That's okay. You don't need to. You're welcome to do the work. Hey, Yafid, thanks very much. It was starting to feel a little bit too much like a lecture that I was doing in class and not so much like a conversation with friends. And KP's out. Okay, so Adventure Hat. Had to refresh, but still here. All right, cool. Anyway, it's been a week, so I'm probably reading too much into things. lack of sleep, stress, it does horrible things to your brain. Everybody should take a collective breath and let's talk about the Shia dynasty. I was trying to come up with an Ayn Rand joke regarding the great inventors maybe not existing, but I whiffed. Yeah. I don't know. I think given the overwhelming... Oh man, I'm going to have to be really careful when I say this, or I'm going to get political. Given the current climate, I don't know if Ayn Rand is necessarily somebody that we need to be bringing up in conversation to make jokes about anyway. But I appreciate the effort. So let's talk about the Shia dynasty. And most specifically, whether or not these guys existed, dynasty. Okay. Because we really don't know too much about the Shia dynasty. They did not leave records of themselves. We're only going to see references to them in later Chinese culture. We don't really have a lot of concrete dating. We don't really have a lot of really strong, credible archaeological evidence. So why in the devil am I wasting everybody's time talking about these people? Well, because it's getting clearer. There is actually, and I mentioned this earlier, one of the things that China is doing right now is investing a lot of money and time in archaeology. And I've sort of referred in the past streams to particular countries that have really tried to politicize archaeology, and China is definitely at the top of that. The Chinese government is very, very interested in controlling the narrative of their country. And I think we're all aware, or hopefully we are all aware, of how badly China has done stuff in the past to literally rewrite their own culture. We won't get into Mao until much later unless it comes up in a review, or not a review, a request. But stuff like the Cultural Revolution in China that basically turned Chinese schools into brainwashing centers, that kind of stuff is still very much going on. And so China is dumping a lot of money into archaeological research and expansion of their archaeological departments at their universities, and bringing in outside countries to assist them doing archaeological work. The assisting stuff where they're bringing in more outside people is a little bit of a response to the fact that the things that were being published in China, especially referring to people like the Shia dynasty, was really lopsided. And they realized that their individual credibility publishing stories about their own history was a little bit in question. So they're like, oh yeah, let's bring in some British people or some German people. And look, we're being good partners with the rest of the world. They brought in some Americans. There are some Americans that are doing some research over there. So the Shia dynasty is a hot topic right now. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's a lot of sort of moving pieces that are coming around. People are asking a lot of questions about the Shia dynasty. And we know that the ancient Chinese people thought that these existed, right? But the question really is, are the Shia another one of these like big fish stories? Are they not really as cool as everybody seems to think they were? Or is there any actual basis to their existence? So let's talk about this a little bit. There is a potential analog culture called the Erletau. And I'm spelling this badly. Erletau culture. Or Erletau culture. These are a northern Chinese civilization. Again, up here in this... Oh, I'm doing that thing again. I keep referring to this. When I move my cursor on my screen doing my Google Earth, it doesn't line up for some reason with what the cursor looks like on your version of my Google Earth that I'm using. Hey, there's a follow. Thank you, Jumbob422. That scared the devil out of me. I should probably turn that down a little bit. It scared the crap out of me on my side. But welcome. Thanks for the follow. Feel free to ask questions. And make goofy remarks or sarcastic comments. Whatever you want to do. Welcome. that really did scare the devil out of me. I'm like, always my favorite teacher at Open Door. Oh, okay. Now we're pulling back old students from a long time ago. I don't know who Jim Bob 422 is, but cheers. I've got water, by the way. For those of you that do not know, my first teaching gig was at a school in Tuscaloosa called Open Door Christian School. So, from a long... Oh, dude, Charles. Hey, man, what's going on? This guy can tell you horrible stories about me. Stuff like he claims, allegedly, that he tried to put me in a sleeper hold and I flipped him over my shoulder and it made him kick a young child, which did not happen. Him trying to put me in a sleeper hold did happen, and me flipping him over my shoulder did happen. But him kicking the child is complete made up. It was a slanderous comment. Yeah, man, absolutely. Welcome. Make sarcastic remarks. Tell horrible stories about my past. Expose all of the lies that I've been perpetuating on these other people. Or just hang out and enjoy. It's good to see you, though, man. Good to see you. We'll make nerd references here in a little bit. I'll work it out. Okay, so who are these Erlitao people, right? Well, it's another one of these northern Chinese people. They come from this region up in here. There's been some pretty big excavations at this site, and they made some pretty neat stuff. Let's look at some of the stuff that I have here. Most notably, this guy right here, which is made out of bronze. Now, this is, of course, going to bring us to the good old-fashioned Bronze Age. And that's what the Xia dynasty is going to represent in Chinese culture, right? So if we're looking back at the Chinese culture, we've got the Longshan culture that create these mythical kings, and they bring us from wandering around to settling down in one spot. The Xia are going to be the people that figure out how to do stuff out of metal. This, by the way, is a wine pitcher to serve wine out of. It doesn't look so great. It's kind of jacked up, but again, it's, you know, it's 5,000 years old, so don't hate too much. But also, this is the preliminary stuff that you see out of bronze, and we don't actually have a whole bunch of pieces of evidence for this bronze making stuff, but you get the idea. So why are we concerned about this Erlitao culture? Well, the carbon dating and the archaeological stuff that has gone on at these sites of the Erlitao culture line up with the ancient records of the Xia dynasty, right? So the ancient Chinese people said the Xia existed, and here's where they existed, and here's when they existed. And so when we dig stuff up that matches the description chronologically speaking, and chronologically what we're talking about is somewhere around 2200 BC to about 1600 BC. And then you also get early metal evidence, which is recorded for these people, and you also get a regional lineup. This is a pretty strong indicator that these people might be the Xia. But again, we don't have good writing, right? The sources that record Xia history are going to be written almost 1,000 years later, which is pretty sketchy, right? If I told you something now and then 1,000 years from now somebody wrote it down, I think we're all aware of how crazy that gets when it gets to actually dating junk, right? Like, is it actually a thing? Can we trust it? We're not sure. Ancient sources say things, modern sources disagree. Modern sources say things, ancient sources disagree. There's a big question mark around the Xia dynasty. But there are some pretty cool stories, and this is actually getting us to the goofy title of the night, What I Like About You. Because the supposed founder of the Xia dynasty is this dude named Yu the Great, which is either a goofy Chinese name or a really, really horrible English sentence. You the Great. No, I'm the Great. No, you the Great. What did Keanu Reeves say? No, you're magical or marvelous. I can't remember. There was a whole meme about that. Anyway, so Yu the Great is supposed to take over from these mythical kings, and he's going to establish the first dynasty. And he does this by being a really cool guy and doing all sorts of great things. And supposedly, this guy like waded out into the middle of the big rivers and like moved the course of the rivers and worked in the rivers so much that like the mud stained his skin. You're breathtaking. That's right. So Yu the Great did all of these amazing things, and what he is probably going to recognize or represent are sort of, again, these mythological placeholders. Because under this period of time, you're starting to see these big cities up in northern China have regional power bases, right? So your regional power base is going to make you a kingdom, right? And that means you're going to have to be in competition with others. You're going to have to maximize your ability to grow agriculture. You were hoping that enough time would pass before I checked the chat and I'd forget the context of that comment. The only problem with that, Kelly, is that I know KP so well that I would immediately be suspicious about that. Like, if he just sort of came out of nowhere with "you're breathtaking," I would start looking behind me for the inevitable backstab. Not that he stabs me in the back, but I don't think I have ever heard him say in the course of our 30-something plus year friendship that I am a breathtaking individual. Maybe that my stupidity was breathtaking. Or maybe that my ego was breathtaking. Or maybe that my nerdiness was breathtaking. But not me as an individual, no. But that would have been great. I would have immediately been suspicious. Start checking my email for some sort of hacking attempts, or this person is logged into your computer from distance, or your password's been changed. Like, oh, dang it. Come on, KP. Anyway, you've called me many things, and that's true. And I would venture a guess that a vast majority of those are accurate, including the ones that are offensive, because I was and still am a little bit of a jerk. And do dumb stuff, but not that. Now I'm referring to, or reminded of Meatloaf, doing anything for love, but not doing that. So you've called me many things, but never breathtaking. Now I'm going to have to figure out a way to get you to do that. I'm going to have to orchestrate a scenario where that happens. Oh, man. You guys make me laugh. I needed the laugh. That was good stuff. Okay, so what's up with Yu the Great being one of these, again, sort of mythological figures? Again, so he's the guy that is going to represent irrigation, right? So this is a big deal. Once you need more farmland, you have to make more farmland. Of course, irrigation comes after agriculture and typically becomes a problem after your cities start expanding in population. So he's going to fall into that mythological role. Also, he passes the throne to his son, which is going to set up the first dynasty, which is why it's referred to as the Xia dynasty. And that's why these guys are important, because they represent these sort of transitional movements. So even if they aren't real, even if all of the stories that we have about the Xia dynasty are not concrete, the sort of roles that they play are super important, right? Because this is following that same transition of cultural progression that we've talked about, right? The whole reason in the earlier streams that I talked about this step of, nomadic to semi-nomadic to living in villages to living in small cities to kingdoms to empires is because that's the sort of trajectory that you can apply all over the place, and we've just applied it here to China, right? Irrigation for the win. I like irrigation. It's a pretty cool tactic. By the way, a lot of this stuff is in China and is being very, very well preserved. And China is doing a lot to sort of try to push, and this is going to be uncomfortable right now, but push tourism. And one of the things that China is really doing a lot of is especially cultural tourism amongst their own people to sort of make China more aware of its own roots. And this is, again, sort of a propaganda sort of thing, but as a foreign person, you can actually go visit a lot of these places. Now, number one, pandemic. Duh. Number two, going to China and going out to the sort of backwoods of China to see a lot of these places as American might not be the best thing to do right now because we're in a bit of an argument with China, the Chinese, and all those people. Yeah, you know how all that goes. Maybe when things calm down in the future, we can all go to China together. I would love to go to China and bring the adventure hat with me. That would be really cool. And get some pictures of this stuff. There are limited pictures that have been released on the net about all of these locations and people. So if you want to look some more of this stuff up, please feel free to do so. But be aware you're going to see about the same 10 or 15 pictures over and over and over again. Shang Dynasty. That's when I took over China, right? That was muscle memory. Shang Dynasty. These guys are important for a few reasons. First off, these are the actual first provable, beyond a doubt, people groups that formed big kingdoms inside China. These are the first provable dynasty. And that alone is important, but they're also going to give us a lot of the momentum that sort of turns us into what we might call classical China. So when you start thinking about China and you start seeing in your head certain modes of dress, certain types of architecture, certain types of mythology and art, the Shang Dynasty is the foundation that builds slowly into that classical Chinese image. And the Shang Dynasty are super fascinating, and I really, really like these guys. And I've got basically the rest of the pictures for the night are from the Shang Dynasty. I sort of wanted to save those because I think these people are super cool. They're going to have a really big capital, which is a city called Yin. Later, this becomes a really big city called Anyang. And when I say big city, I'm talking here like 100,000 plus people in it. They're going to formalize the Chinese religion into what is the basis of what we might call native Chinese religion. When you think Chinese religion today and you think Confucianism and Buddhism and Taoism, none of those are actually original Chinese religion, right? The earliest of those doesn't really show up until probably about 1,000 years or so after the beginning of the Shang Dynasty, which happens around 1600 BC. There's maybe some Taoist stuff that is older than that now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, we'll talk about Chinese religion more. But the early stuff that I'm talking about, the formulation of ancestor worship, the continuation of human sacrifice, the belief in the afterlife, the propagation of the ideas of spirit world and physical world, all of this stuff is really going to get formalized and codified during the Shang Dynasty. And one of the coolest things that the Shang Dynasty gave us are crap tons of turtle shells. I know everybody's excited about turtle shells, but let's talk about these because they are actually really cool. Again, this is Erlitau bronze here, potential Shia Dynasty stuff. But let's look at this guy. First off, this is the stomach part of a turtle, right? So what would drag the ground here? And you notice that there are all these different symbols on here, and there are all these weird little lines. Crap ton? Oh yeah, I use crap ton all the time. Is that an odd statement? Again, I'm trying to keep it on the PG level. I know that there might be children listening, so I'm trying to be funny and lighthearted, yet clean-mouthed. I might say poop ton. Me too. Not odd at all. Okay, cool. Awesome. I'm glad that other people say that phrase as well. It makes me feel not so alone. Anyway, what are we looking at? So again, it's a turtle shell, but most specifically, this is an oracle bone. And there's actually a pretty involved process as to what's going on here. So imagine, if you will, Chinese Jimmy decides that he wants to sell some crops, but he doesn't know if he should sell at the beginning of the selling season or hold his wares till the end of the selling season. And so Jimmy is going to go to the priest, and he's going to ask the priest to give him an oracle. And what the priest is going to do is mark up this turtle shell. Also, by the way, sometimes if you're really, really fancy and very, very rich, you could also use the shoulder blades of cows. But as you might expect, killing a cow to get a shoulder blade is a lot more expensive than just killing a turtle. So if you find a big shoulder blade oracle bone, you know that this is a big old dude, maybe the king asking something, or some super rich guy that can afford to, get a cow bone. I'd prefer my oracles to be written on cow, please. Snotty ancient Jimmy. Anyway, so the priest is going to write all of these symbols on this turtle shell. And these symbols might represent lots of different things and put into little codes here. So maybe one little brick says this week, and one little brick says next week, and one little brick says the week after next, and then the other one says 2 weeks after now. And what's going to happen, that was the puppy shaking herself right under the table and whacking it with her big old floppy tail. What happens is you're going to find a little hole that gets drilled into the turtle shell. And into that little hole, like you can see it, maybe here or here, maybe over here. Anyway, you're going to insert this really, really hot needle. And why in the devil would you do that? Well, it turns out that when you poke a really hot needle into a turtle shell, the turtle shell will eventually crack. And then the priest would look at the crack and interpret where the crack was kind of running across one of these symbols, and that would be your sort of magic 8-ball of the ancient world. So signs point to next week, and that's how you would know. Or, and what's really neat about this stuff is you see these shells stored, and especially the ones that are big important prophecies or big important oracles, like king oracles and stuff like that. You go to a Chinese palace, and there would be hundreds of these stacked up in a room. And it would ask you, or it would give you information like who is the asker, who is the priest, the date of the asking, what the question was. And this is absolutely wicked cool for us because we can get a peek into the lives of these people. And there are actually really big translations of a lot of these oracle bones that have been published in English, by the way, in translation. So if you Google oracle bone stuff, you can find a whole bunch of these requests. And it's stuff like, should I marry my daughter to this family? Should I buy this piece of land? Should I enter into this contract with this other dude? Is this person being honest with me? Do the gods favor this? Are my ancestors protecting me from that thing? So these oracle bones are actually really wicked cool. Like them a lot. I'm getting a little nerded out by these, and I know that everybody is not so excited about turtle shells as I am, but I like turtles. Anyway, so you're also going to start seeing around this time period really clear social order, and you're going to develop social classes. And these social classes are going to be broken down into what you might expect. You've got your ruling class, you've got your nobles. Why turtles? Because they're all over the place in this region. They were easily found, and they had flat shells. Turtles all the way down. If that's a reference to Sturgill Simpson, I love me some Sturgill Simpson. I think I said that in the last stream, but I'm really excited. Turtles All the Way Down is a song by Sturgill Simpson, by the way. I think that tomorrow Sturgill Simpson is doing a free live stream concert for all of you that might be interested. I can't remember when. I needed to Google it. But if you're a Sturgill Simpson fan, free live stream concert tomorrow. So the oracle bones are kept by the priest. Why would you want to keep evidence if you are wrong? Oh, that's a great question. Because the way that the priest would always want to write these questions down is very, very open-ended. So you would ask the question to the priest, and then the priest's skill set was to interpret your question into a question that the gods would be interested in answering. So if you ask me something like, will I win the battle tomorrow? And then the priest would take that and sort of have to look at it and go, And then by choosing the proper runes or characters to write on there, the priest might give you an answer that would say, the spirits are behind you as long as you're honoring them. Right? So then if you lost and you go, well, dadgummit, you said that I had the spirits on my side, and the priest could go, now, king, now, sir, you'll remember that I said that the spirits would be behind you if you were honoring them. Did you honor them the right way? Did you make the proper sacrifices? Did you say the right prayers? Did you think badly about Granddad and think that you were going to be greater than him when you won this battle? See, now that's not honoring your ancestors. So I told you the right thing. Did anybody else keep loose audio? No. Did anyone else lose audio? No, not I. Sources say no. So yeah, you get the sort of vague answers that can be yes and can be no. Twitch has booted me twice during the stream. Oh, that's no good. Let me see if I'm still broadcasting the right way. It doesn't say that my session has been interrupted. Though it is spinning on me right now, and my bitrate appears to be a bit low. You're doing fine. I think it's network congestion. Had a little glitchy stuff earlier, but all good right now. Okay. All right. Well, if things go haywire, let me know, and I'll do what I can. I'll try not to be so elaborate. Maybe we can sort of move through this a little bit. Maybe not necessarily quickly, but with a little bit less goofy on my part. You all be as goofy as you desire. Okay, so you get these nice big social structures, and of course, you're still going. It just went silent for a few seconds. Okay, apologies. That might have actually been me. I don't know. So, turtle shell, yes, but let's look at... Oh, I need to zoom this back out. Whoop. This guy. This is a tomb of a royal called Fu Hao. And you can see all of the cool stuff inside of the tomb. It's, of course, very, very large and elaborate. You've got really cool sculptures. You've got grave goods. You've got really nice big chest full of stuff here. Of course, you have bones. This would have actually been a horse, probably, that was sacrificed and sent to the afterlife with you. But you get these really big honking tombs. And, of course, this is sort of part and parcel of having really powerful rulers and also having powerful rulers that can command labor, right? Because to literally hew this sort of tomb out of the rock, you've got to have a lot of people that are going to be able to show up to build your tomb. So another part of the Shang culture is this class organization. You have artisans, you have workers, you have laborers, you have your good old-fashioned agriculturalist stuff like that. And this is going to lead us to some really just absolutely beautiful pieces of stuff like this. One of the things that happens under the Shang dynasty is the development of ways to cast bronze. So in the earlier piece, this Erlital vessel, what we have right here, this is not what we would call a cast bronze piece. This is almost certainly made into a big bronze sheet and then hammered or maybe melted into, or not melted, but got very, very hot and then shaped. It's not a cast piece of bronze. So this would have been probably 5 or 6 different pieces that had been mushed and bashed and then welded and then hammered into place. This stuff is different. Casting involves a lot more skill, a lot more knowledge, and this is only going to be possible when you have truly skilled artisans. And that's not going to happen until you have a very, very stable culture that can support the existence of artisans. So this would be one solid piece of bronze, and you can see just all of the super intricate little details. You've got a dragon here, you've got wings of a bird, a fish up here, all of these tiny little pieces of decoration would have been carved into a mold and then liquid bronze poured into that mold to cast this piece. And this stuff is just, it blows my mind. The intricacy and detail that these people were able to make in this stuff just never ceases to amaze me. And if we put this on a comparative timeline, so if we're looking at other Bronze Age cultures, around that 1600 to, okay, there we go. Sorry, I got stuck there. From that 1600 to about 1000 or 1100 timeline, you're not going to see stuff like this in a lot of those other cultures. If you're looking at Bronze Age Egypt, you might find a complementary type of piece, but in a lot of the big Bronze Age cultures, like even places like Babylon and Assyria, you might not find something this intricately carved, detailed, super skilled type of stuff. Because China was moving up in the world at the time. These guys of the Shang dynasty really had their act together. But, as you might expect... I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this. As you might expect, with cool stuff comes people that want your cool stuff, right? Everybody wants the cool stuff. And this is going to lead to fighting. The kings of the Shang dynasty are going to fully control the territory. They're going to not own all of the territory, but they're going to be the ones that decide who gets to be the governors. There are organized systems of local government as well. So you have the king and then territorial governors, then you have local officials, and then the base level structure is the clan, the family. And the leader of your clan had actually political control over you as well. But these kings are going to be constantly at odds with the people around them. And you're going to see a lot of movement of people, especially around the 1300 to 1200 period of time. There are lots of people groups on the move. And we've talked about this already. We've talked about the Indo-Europeans moving into the sort of Mesopotamia region, also down into India. That movement pushes other people around, and there might be some admixture between the Shang dynasty of northern China and some of these people, because contrary to what I thought, like when I was first really studying history and very, very young, when I was like in high school, I always thought that to get from India to China, you would just go boom right here, right across this area. But that's actually not where most of the early contact came from. This region right here is notorious for having really bad weather. It's very swampy. It's also very high in elevation, and it's very thick, dense jungle. The trek that you actually saw where most stuff gets from India to China is a northerly route, and it follows this sort of band of mountains right through this little green swoop right here, and ends up passing into northern China, the area that we've been talking about right up here. So there is evidence that some of the what you might call Indo-European horse peoples actually had contact with the people up in the northern part of the Shang dynasty. because you start seeing Shang kings use war chariots, which is something that has a lot of symbolic and archaeological importance to the Indo-Europeans. And we'll talk about them a little bit later when we get to talking about the Mitanni people and the Hittites and the Hurrians and all those guys. But you're going to see a lot of fighting. And there are going to be invaders from the outside, but you're also going to have to keep the people under your control intact and keep them in check, make sure that you're running the show the right way. But they don't have a standing army. They do have pretty elaborate military skills. You're going to see nobles being trained in strategy and thought and tactics, but you're not going to see what you might call professional soldiers yet. But because I like this and I think that the Shang Dynasty is really cool, I have more pictures to show you, and it's all about war stuff. So here's a really great example of a bronze ceremonial sword that would have been probably owned by a noble or some upper class individual. You can see the stylized handle here being a person, the blade itself of bronze. This does not look like the average Shang Dynasty soldier's sword. It would have been much more simple with a wooden handle. But you do get some pretty neat little armor. The armor that they use is these bronze plates that are fitted onto leather, hardened leather usually. The top part of the bronze helmet here is cast, and then you have some smaller ear flaps and a visor to keep the sun out of your eyes. And I do have a cool picture here of a chariot. This is from another one of these really big tombs where a king would have been buried in this really big mound, and you see actual horses being sacrificed with the king and the chariots being sort of like put in space so that the king can lead his charge into the afterlife. And these chariots would have had, this by the way would have been all sort of bronze fitting. There would have been kind of a wicker or wooden rail that went up here to sort of act as a waist guard. These were multi-peopled chariots. You're usually going to have 2 or 3 soldiers in the chariot, one person to drive and one person to fight at least, sometimes 2 people to fight, one person with a bow and one person with a spear. And chariots are going to be really big for a lot of the Shang military that we actually have quite a good bit of record of from the time period, because they're also going to be big on writing stuff down